Welcome to Psychedelics, Spirituality, and the Boundary Conditions of Responsibility. I'm Anna Walsh, and I'll be your host, and I'm the producer of this show. It's not going to be a regular type talk show. It's just going to be pretty much my guest is going to be explaining from his point of view the subject. So I'd like to introduce Charlie Van Boven, who's going to be talking about spirituality, psychedelics. Welcome, Charlie.
Thank you very much. Okay. This is sort of my soapbox, and because I hate having to talk to, blank cameras, Anna's been a kind enough friend to hang out with me here, so I'm going to keep blathering, and when I panic too much, I'll be looking at you and so forth. So, let me start with a story. Just get started. People have probably heard this, but I like telling it anyway. There's these blind people, and they're looking to understand the secrets of this thing called an elephant. And they're going up, and they finally come upon the elephant. And the first one walks up and says, oh, yes, I have discovered the secret of the elephant. It is basically like a tree. Yes. And he's grabbing the leg or something. And says, no, you don't know anything. This elephant, it is clearly basically like a fan. Just here. Okay, he says, no, both of you're crazy. This elephant is clearly mostly like a giant python. Oh my goodness. And he says, crazy, all of you don't understand. Don't you use your mind, your senses? Can't you see that elephant is basically, a spear, basically. No. Can't you see the elephant? Clearly, is fundamentally like a war. Yes, clearly. So, no. The elephant is like a rope with a excuse me, a little tassel on the end. It says, no, all of you wrong. It is fundamentally like a fleshy little sphincter with that's all matter inside it. Now, this is a story it's been hanging around for a long time. It was created by the Sufis, a mystic sect of the Muslim religion. And it was supposed to be an allegory for humankind's relationship to God. Okay, and Coleridge made a way cool little poem about it. And it's been used as a metaphor forever for anything that people can't quite get a handle on in its entirety. And when they keep reducing it to the one thing they can get a hold on to. What I'm going to be talking about is something that our culture has had a hard time getting a handle on, and that is psychedelics and the experience they engender in people. And what our culture has chosen to do is make it illegal to have these experiences. I'm going to try and come up with some sort of formulation, some kind of argument in which, under certain conditions, I would argue that it is appropriate to make it legal to access using the psychedelics. Okay, this is a two-part presentation, right. And let's just get started.
Yeah.
Okay. This is my personal interpretation of what's going on. I'm going to try and start from the most objective things, and then we'll move into the more problematic from there. Psychedelics, first of all, as I said, are way legal. I'll have a lot more to say about that. These include things like THC, the active ingredient in cannabis sativa or marijuana. It's a very mild hallucinogen, or I should say a psychedelic, properly speaking. Psychedelic means mind manifesting. There's also all sorts of mushrooms, psilocybin, mescaline. The most famous psychedelic would be LSD. There is another psychedelic, which honestly I haven't used. Its common street name is called ecstasy, but MDMA, which is, I'm very fascinated the more I read about this. Because there's been some arguments that if MDMA had been discovered before LSD, the 60s would have been very different, because LSD has a much wider range of effects and so forth, whereas ecstasy seems to be focused without the same visual effects as LSD. and tends to be a more consistently positive experience. That's it's called ecstasy. I'm probably going to be talking mostly about LSD, but when I change gears, I'll be talking about that. The psychedelics are not the opiates. They're not heroin. They're not opium. Opium does have some effects, but along psychedelic lines, but the psychedelics, I'm going to say, are not going to include cocaine. They're not going to include crack. They're not going to include alcohol. And specifically, the psychedelics on a physiological level are not addictive. This is a big deal. Now, whether they are psychologically addictive is another matter, okay? Because what is a psychological addiction becomes contingent. You get addicted to running or playing with little toys or something. I don't know, whatever. But from a strictly physiological basis, when you take the psychedelics, any of these substances for a period of time, and you stop taking them, there doesn't seem to be any physiological reaction, as opposed to, say, heroin or certainly alcohol, okay? All right, so that's the straightforward part. Now I want to try and talk about what psychedelics do, okay? First thing I want to say is that there is this huge consensus by everybody who has ever done the psychedelics that there's no way you can put into words what this experience is basically like. So this is going to be very indirect, my attempt to try and characterize what is going on. The most famous account of what the psychedelics do was written up by a guy called Aldous Huxley in a book called The Doors of Perception. Jim Morrison read this book and said, hey, wait, this is way cool. I should start a rock band. Call it after that, you know, The Doors, all right? Huxley took his title from a line by the poet, artist, mystic William Blake that when the doors of perception are cleansed, all of the universe will be revealed as to man for what it is, infinite. I'll try and justify what that would mean. Obviously, I'm talking right now for people who have not done the psychedelics. Huxley also quotes a metaphor from a guy called Henry Bergson that talks about the human mind being a reducing valve or sphincter, whatever metaphor you care to use, in which, just from a strictly logical point of view, you can imagine that there's a million things you could possibly be paying attention to at any one time. Right now, you're trying to pay attention to me, okay?
Right.
But there's your knee, there's these things, there's all these lights you can look around at, there's the floor, and just all the visual things you could possibly choose to pay attention to. And that's just in the visual sensory surround, okay? Then there's all the things you could remember and daydream about, okay? Now, to get through your day, to get anywhere, you've got to be able to focus, to pay attention to what's going on. If you're doing psychedelics, you do not want to be making any big life decisions right away, okay? As if you would be even inclined to do so. Because there's a tendency to get flooded with all these things you can look around at. I'm going to tell a story, okay? Long time ago, I was sitting on the corner of Eastview and Southview, and I was talking with a friend about whether I should take LSD for the first time or not, and we were kind of joking about it, and then I'm just kind of standing around, and I start idly just kind of looking at my thumb a little bit here, you know, and everybody get your thumbs out here. And we're just kind of sitting there, and I start kind of staring in at it, you know, and I'm just idly making this comment, you know, there's these kind of little rivels running in my thumbnail, you know, and it kind of looks like the furrows of a field or something, and you know, the crescent there looks sort of like a sunrise, you know, and you know, if you look at it more, you know, it sort of reminds me of sort of like the waves, the wind waves you see on a sand dune, and well, my friend kind of looked at me like this. Charlie, she says, you know, I really don't think you should do LSD because you're already halfway there. You know, and I'm going, well, anyway, what can I say? The point I want to make about this is that the psychedelics have a tendency to, in principle, sort of exaggerate what the human mind can do anyway, basically. This sort of expanding the valve or sphincter, whatever, of the mind. And there are a couple of different people, Andrew Weil, I'm trying to think of his first name, R-E-L Houston, who's doing a lot of body work with enough disciplines. You can have psychedelic trips just through body work and disciplines. But the psychedelics can invary by just taking a pill. Well, I mean, if we were to sit you down or set somebody down in a room and have them just stare at their thumb for about 30 minutes, give them a lot of money, and you're going to get a lot more money for every single association you come up to your thumb, okay? And for 30 minutes, you could really think about, you come up with all these way cool associations. Wow, wonderful. When you're tripping, you can come up with every one of those in about 30 seconds, okay? I remember trying to reconstruct my first trip, you know, just analyzing what the heck it was about. And it sort of reminded me of, like, if you take a deck of cards and you run your thumb across and it goes, you know, the shooting through. And it's like, there's all these things to look at, you know, it's really wild, you know. And I was trying to it was sort of the analogy I could come up with from normal experience was like sitting in a train and looking out the window and all these things going by. And, you know, it's like these things are shooting by. You're not physically moving, okay, but all this stuff goes by and it's a trip. Okay, but the thing is, what you can be tripping about are whatever's around you, or what you daydream about, or the daydreams you have off of what you see, and it gets really, it can be as varied and personal as a dream. Okay. I should toss in something here about set and setting. Okay, these are the classic terms for defining what direction. Set and setting, for the record, happens to also, you know, your mindset, it corresponds to your mindset and the environment you happen to be in, the physical setting. That also determines your normal consciousness, for a large part, okay? What you're expecting to do, what you're planning to do, and the environment that reminds you of things, okay? But the hassle is, well, maybe not a hassle, it depends on what your goals are, so to speak, out of the trip. Is that you're much more easily distractible, okay? And you can start shooting off on all these associations in a way that have no subjective sense of control. They just kind of appeared to you, okay? All these different associations. And so this is sort of important. If you're feeling a little anxious about using the psychedelics, you're afraid that, oh, you know, you're thinking for the very first time of doing it, you're feeling a little scared about it, here's a good rule of thumb. Don't do it. Don't do it, okay? If you have friends trying to push you into it and you're feeling, well, I'm not sure I want to do this, just, you are the authority in this one. Take a break, okay? I'm not suggesting, I don't want horrors if I was to suggest that, you know, I would encourage anybody from doing this sort of thing. But if you have any qualms about doing this, I would strongly suggest not doing it. I'll have more to say about this in a second, I think. I remember I used to teach a class at community high school, and I would be talking about how when you're dreaming, I would teach about dreams, that it's sort of analogous to tripping in some respects, because you can kind of associate, you know, very freely while you're dreaming. But every once in a while, you might run into something that makes you very anxious. You know, you start having a nightmare, and you start going, ooh, you know. And the beauty of dreaming is, okay, the hassle with tripping is you don't get to wake up. That's why bad trips have their bad reputation. Okay. Now, the flip side is, if you include in your setting some nice friends who can distract you, okay, because you're very easily distractible while you're tripping, then you can be kind of brought out of it. Okay, so say, hey, come on, let's look over here. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. Whatever, you know, take a deep breath. It's okay, you know. There aren't nearly as many reports of bad trips as there used to be. You know, during the 60s when it first came out, you know, people didn't know what was going on. You know, and nowadays it's almost sort of common knowledge. What I have to say here is probably pretty boring to a lot of people, okay? But it's worth just saying this out loud. Okay, that if you have an expectation of knowing what's going on, having a nice physical setting is really nice. People like trees and grass and whatever, and what you don't want are mad dogs barking at you or shit, you know, pardon me, we'll edit this, and all sorts of bad things, okay? Now, if you were tripping, this could echo in your head, stuff like that, okay? And you want to have friends who can take you out of a bad space. You want to, ideally, some people like to have nice music to dance around to, stuff like that. You know, and that's a lot of fun, okay? Because you can get totally lost in whatever you'll pay attention to, okay? And people enjoy the trip. Okay, way cool. There's another aspect of mindset that I want to toss in about how, and this involves sort of your philosophy of life. Okay, or your, maybe this is too grandiose a term, your faith, okay? If you're just having a trip to have fun, that's one thing, okay. But if you're kind of a seeker, if you're trying to explore yourself or something, you know, you remember your dreams and you write them down. Nightmares can give you a lot of interesting information, and you can put them in perspective, okay? I had this friend who told me that she could always tell a relationship was really bad when the best thing somebody could say about it was they learned a lot from it, you know. The trips that you might learn the most from are sometimes the ones that would be called bad. Okay, this is not an encouragement to go out and have a bad trip, but the mindset you have can have a powerful spin on when difficult subjects come up. Okay, now this gets into issues involving using LSD, say, for therapy. Okay, there's something like 1,000 research papers published between 1950 and 1965 involving, you know, psychedelics. And when used by professionals under a guided, you know, supervised situation, there weren't any out-of-control situations. All the bad trips seemed to come from people who were experimenting with these things and not knowing what to do about it. All right, that's roughly what I have to say about what psychedelics do. Okay. What I want to talk now about is spirituality. Another story. I got this from my first mentor here at the U of M. He was teaching mathematics to a middle school. They didn't have middle schools in the late 1950s. And they were teaching, I'll relate this to psychedelics.
Okay.
That how, you know, you multiply a positive plus times a positive, you get a positive number. You multiply a negative times a positive, you get a negative number. And a positive times a negative, you get a negative number. Whenever you multiply a negative times a negative, you always get a negative number. Okay, and that's just all there is. And this all seemed very clear to these ninth graders, okay. And then he was explaining square roots, okay, where some number times itself would equal something else, and that would be the square root of that something else, all right. Now, what would be the square root of a negative number? All right, and logically, that's impossible on the basis of these rules I just laid out. Now, there is a real live category of numbers like this. They are called imaginary. They happen to be intrinsic to the use of building nuclear weapons, so they're not that imaginary, take my word for it. But they make no consistent sense within what is logically understood. And this ninth grade girl is kind of looking at the blackboard, and she's really taking this seriously. And she's going, the square root of a negative number. And she goes, Mr. Goodman, do you believe in heaven and hell? And the first thing he does is gets everybody to shut up, okay? Because all the boys want to go, "Bah!" You know, all right. No. But what he knows is that she's asking the right question, or phrase that, if she's using her head in the right way. Okay, what she's doing is she's trying to come up with a larger framework to make sense of something that doesn't cohere, doesn't fit together. Okay? Now, when you are tripping, a lot of stuff happens. It doesn't always cohere. Mm-hmm. Okay? And there's a tendency to try and think, well, what's going on? You know, how this is now. I've had a long talk with this one guy in particular, who says he's taking outrageously large amounts of LSD all at the same time, and has never had a spiritual experience. And I've talked with him, and he has this belief about the universe that, you know, eventually the physicists are going to explain everything. There's no loose ends out there. And he's very well read about the anthropology of religion. Okay, and basically people's beliefs about God are a result of their culture, and that's basically it, and it's all hooey, basically. And he's not much of a searcher, okay? He has a mindset that accommodates all these weird questions that could come up, okay, about what's it all about, Alfie? You know, whatever, you know, what's the big picture here? But when you're tripping, and if you've got a mindset to try and explore what's going on, it's just sort of natural to start thinking about what's a larger frame to reconcile all of these different. I mean, suppose you're not just thinking about imaginary numbers. A lot of mathematicians are mystics, practically. They're all Platonists. Believe in Plato with his idea that the universe is comprised basically of there's these supernatural entities, and this physical world is just a set of shadows, projections of these supernatural entities. And if you're a mathematician, that actually starts making a lot of sense, especially if you're fooling around with imaginary numbers after a while, okay? But if you're tripping, and suppose you're not thinking just about numbers or, you know, playing around. You start thinking about what happens when you die, okay? And you know, that seems straightforward because when you're in a normal state of consciousness, you have the ability to not be distracted. You know, when I said mad dogs barking at you or something, you can say, all right, it's no big deal, fine. But if you were tripping, it would kind of echo in your head a little bit, okay? It would take a little more efforts to get you out of that mindset, okay? If you start thinking about what's going to happen to me after I die while you're tripping, you know, and you say, well, I know nothing's going to happen. Well, what does that mean? You know, and it's just a zillion associations come up. And it's hard to not think about, you know, we use the word God to point at the sort of ultimate framework, the sort of context of all contexts, okay? The first cause, whatever you want to refer to it as. And when you're tripping and you're in this mode of seeking, okay, that's important. You have to be kind of a seeker. This is where it gets really ineffable. There's this profound experience of seeing either God or whatever God's supposed to be. Okay. All right. This leads to a kind of interesting question. Are these experiences real? You know. Well, are they real? Is that real? You know, I mean, yeah, it's real. Okay, and what's not discountable is the fact that people have these experiences. Okay, people have the experiences of seeing God or whatever it was. Okay, it was this way big elephant. I didn't see all of it, but I got one handle on it. Okay, you know. So the next interesting question maybe is to ask, well, all right, is what they think about what they saw real? Was that really God that they thought they saw? or whatever. Okay. I'm thinking. Think of that girl again, you know, Mr. Goodman. You know, I mean, I'm going to argue that, you know, I've already said that the psychedelics exaggerate what the mind already does. I'm going to argue that that little girl was tripping in a small scale, okay? She was probing her own experience to try and make sense of what was going on. And that this gets really hard. I feel like reading from a quote to try and put this in perspective. I'm not going to pretend I can come up with the last word about this right now, okay? But I like this. I like these people. This is from a book called Psychedelic Drugs Reconsidered by Lester Grinspoon and James Bacalar. They're both guys at Harvard, copyright 1979. And think about elephants a little bit when you listen to this, okay? Right. Consider an analogy. Imagine that no one has ever remembered his dreams before, except a few widely ignored mystics, primitives, and madmen. Then someone invents an electrical gadget that permits them to be recalled. At first, dreams come as a revelation. People who use the machine are overwhelmed by their depth of emotion and symbolic significance. They rush out to look up the obscure literature about this neglected state of awareness. Psychologists discover that dreams are the royal road to the unconscious. Others examine them for prophecies, philosophies, religions, and clues to personal salvation and social revolution. Meanwhile, there are many who have never remembered their dreams, do not understand why anyone considers them important or useful. They declare it all to be mental illness and social decadence and demand that the machines be outlawed. Ultimately, the dreamers too become somewhat disillusioned. Remembering and interpreting dreams provides no sure cure for any illness, no obvious alternative view of the world. Their meaning for art, philosophy, and religion is, at best, ambiguous. Many dreams are unpleasant and frightening. People sometimes act foolishly in following the commands of their dreams. Some dream interpretation is superstitious. Some of the popular dream interpreters are of dubious character. And some of the dream cults have repellent practices. Dreams are not the answer. One more paragraph. One possible outcome is that we decide to record and study dreams, relate them to other states of consciousness and to neurophysiology, find out their possible scientific, therapeutic, and creative uses, valid uses, and so on, while cautioning against overvaluation of them. Another possibility is withdrawing in fear, declaring that we were meant to forget our dreams and that remembering them is pathological and socially debilitating, and finally suppressing the means by which they are remembered. We have thus removed a source of disturbance at the price of denying part of our own potential. Psychedelic drugs resemble this imaginary machine. They allow people to see things about themselves that they did not know before without telling them how to interpret and act